Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to Big Blend Radio with Nancy and Lisa. Over the crazy mother-daughter travel team and publishers of Big Blend magazines, hosts of Big Blend Radio, obviously, and also full-time travelers on the Love Your Parks tour. So today we're going to travel to Knoxville, Tennessee to chat with East S.M. That's her author name. We want to know why East. You know, we've got questions. She is the author of the new occult fantasy novel called Mercy's Quest. And that comes out June 21st. So summer solstice. Yeah, right. So you can get it. It takes you on a journey from the Appalachian Mountains, not Appalachian, apparently, Appalachian Mountains into New Orleans. So, you know, there's some mystical stuff going on, some swampy goodness. I mean, come on. You go in the Appalachian area, there is like this mysticism, like it is. And then you go to New Orleans, you got the swampy goodness. So there's all kinds of good stuff that's going on. So I encourage you to go to her website, theartisteast.com. And she's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. I'm going to have to find out what you're doing on TikTok because like that could be really interesting. So welcome to the show. Do we call you East SM or East?
East is fine.
Okay. Oh, she's East. So where the name East? Tell us about that. Let's start there.
So it's I'm a divination artist. I read tarot cards, and I'm a generational reader. And so in our family, and this is fairly common in certain Appalachian mountain families, because I do not always adhere to this rule, read only facing east when the sun comes up. And that is, so east was just a family appreciation, something that came up a lot in my life. And then as someone that got into spiritualism, the direction east and what it symbolizes.
Always east. Churches face to the east, synagogues.
I know,
you know, especially if in Muslim even, right? Don't they do that towards the east? They point to the east?
That I do not know.
Yeah. Yeah, so I remember that from living in Africa, that it was always
east is
to
huge.
the east if you're praying, when you're praying, and it has to do with the sun coming
up.
The
sun rising, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
But then in this country, settling this country was go west, young man, go west. That's weird. Think about it. Everybody else is looking east and they're like, hey, you guys go that way. Go the other way.
Well, it's a whole new thing, but reading tarot cards, this is interesting too. Divination, the occult. I want to start there because how many people are going to go? That's it. The devil's on you for this.
Probably quite a few. I don't know.
And you're in the Appalachian area, which people could, there's kind of.
Listen, I've been primed my whole life to write this kind of content. I grew up, I'm not from Knoxville originally. I'm actually from this very small town called Middlesboro in Kentucky.
Okay.
And it's only about an hour and 40 minutes from where I'm currently located. But in this particular town, much like most very rural Appalachian religious communities, traditional Christianity is absolutely incredibly loud in that area. I mean,
that's a good way of putting it.
Every corner. And so I had the type of grandmother that would go to church and then come home and open up her front door and read tea leaves for people after church.
That's funny.
Nancy Babushka.
I know. So okay, I have to say a long time ago in San Francisco, I was walking down the street and I heard William Shatner's voice saying, come to the Museum of the Occult. And I recognized his voice. I'm like, that's the dude on Star Trek. I like Star Trek, so I'm going to go to the Museum of the Occult.
And he was really cute then.
And
now.
Not bad now either.
He's not. Anyway, he's got the eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I went in and I found my family on my mother's side, the Holroyd family, that apparently my grandfather on my mom's side, the Holroyd family had a castle on the Isle of Man, and that we come from witches.
And they were burned at the stake.
For talking to animals. which I do all the time. I'm like, uh-oh, gotta be careful with that one. When your family's in the Museum of the Occult, which unfortunately that museum has closed now, as far as I know, I can't find it again. But it had some of the weirdest exhibits I've ever seen, and some of the, like, you really had to stretch your mind to wrap around practices of the occult. And some of them didn't seem like we always think devil God, they didn't even.
How about nature?
Yeah, it didn't seem to like fit into either category. It just seemed like existing. Some, yeah, it just, I don't know, it was a weird experience, but we used to be in there, but they closed.
But Nancy does read tea leaves. In fact, she read tea leaves for a friend the other night, and she just does it. I swear, we used to write our own horoscopes that were just for fun in our old magazine, or Nancy's magazine in South Africa, and things would come true from what she wrote. So I don't know what to say about this whole thing, but there is something.
Yeah.
I want to go. Is there an observance thing that is part of this divination? And I even have a hard time saying that word because I want to say it in a different accent and different culture. This is the way it is. I lived in different places, so it is. But is it about nature?
I think that's probably dependent on how your energy is rooting into the situation. I like to think that when I'm sitting down with anyone, I'm respectfully meeting them where they are, and there's an exchange that's happening, just like in general conversation, what we're doing right now. And when I teach, I also teach locally here in Knoxville. I teach tarot classes. And what I tell my students is there's several ways that you can approach divination. You can look at it intellectually and think about symbolic sight. And so, for example, with tarot cards, there's actually a written way to kind of approach that system through the Fool's Journey. And then when you take that over to tea leaves and you're looking for symbols or however you interact in that way, that symbolism is, kind of connected to your experience in this world. So I like to think that whether you're an intellectual reader, someone that, for example, if I were to see the moon in my teacup and I was an intellectual reader, I would think intellectually from a dream symbolism standpoint. What does that mean? Secrets. What does that mean to me as the reader? Now, as an intuitive, that's a different experience because, that we could probably go on for hours, and that's not the direction I'm sure we want to go. But I think that there's room for everyone to have a good experience as long as the person that's facilitating that space is remaining respectful and understands where all parties are kind of sitting with it, if that makes sense. And so when you ask a question about, how, what that experience is like, it's so layered, it's so different for everybody that sits through it,
Yeah, we were just talking about that earlier on a interview, and we were just talking about the state of the world. And we were talking about this thing about you can't blanket these injustices and things that have gone down through the past. You can't blanket them because each thing is individual almost. Even though it's a collective, you can't just go blanket this, blanket that, because we're not looking at the individual perspective. And I think that's something that what you're doing, and even writing your book, you kind of go into those interwoven places that we tend to just barrel through and not even look at. You know what I mean? And that's why I brought up the word observation, because I think that's something we're lacking in the world. And no matter where your religious beliefs are, whether it's an intellectual, natural, all these different things, again, that is going to individualism, yet interconnectivity. Does that make sense? I know that's
absolutely
weird.
I think when you think about it in terms of like a team, like a sports team, that's a collective experience. We all have to kind of come together on the court and execute something in a group environment, but you have individual people that are bringing different uniquity, to that experience. And when that individualism, I think, gets lost, it's just as you just said, people kind of barrel through the collective without noticing those little finite details and that's the stuff that really carves the soul out and really carves out the human experience in this world. When you look at tarot, this is another thing. There's so many people that sit at my table and they say, that could be applicable to anybody. Well, it should. It's reflective of the human experience in this world, and whatever it highlights just happens to be what part of that moment that needs to come to your attention, And so I just feel like, we have to have this moment to stop and understand that, from a subconscious space, we're always reaching for what we need. And if we look at things like meditation, tarot, going to the mountains to hike, whatever your tick is, you have to put yourself in a space to tap into that resource, to find that individual experience. So when you come back to the collective, you can be in the highest vibration that you can possibly be in. How do we contribute to a collective experience when we're tapped out and we're not working on that individual experience? When I come to my team, I want to be the best version of myself that I can be. And so many people just don't really focus on that anymore. They want to go with trends, and they want to go with, what the world thinks, as a whole.
Don't we get lazy when things tend to overwhelm us sometimes? When there's a lot going on, then you just, so-and-so did that, so I'll just go follow them, because you either like them or in some way respect them, or just because you're at that point, what I would call a weak point or a low point, just don't have your normal energy to, like, you're just not your full
You're not
fire
tapped in.
self. Yeah, you're just not your full fire
But
self.
that happens
where-
when you're not taking care of yourself too, or
Well,
a
and,
traumatic
but
experience.
you could have a lot of experience. It doesn't mean you have to be one big one. It could be a lot of little ones. After like a week, you're like, dude, I'm so done.
Go to
you
the
know,
mountain, man, or go to
and-
the swamp.
Yeah, but I also
Or
think
we're meant to sit in that space for a minute, sometimes I think
Yeah.
that we're so quick to kind of rush out of those moments, but having an awareness for it, I think is the big thing. Because there are people that are in those low moments that don't have the awareness or the power, the internal power to understand life is an ebb and flow experience.
yeah.
And they just get lost in that,
Well, I want to ask you about Mercy's Quest, because is that part of writing the book? Because when you are reading, that's your internal journey as a reader, and you're able to connect and make thoughts that no one else is telling you yes or no. It's free. There's a freeing thing about reading where you can learn something. You can take what you want, disregard what you don't want, but it's no one can tell you what to do, because it's still your personal experience. And what you say or do with your friends later, it doesn't matter. What your experience was is true. Do you think that's part of writing Mercy's Quest?
I think, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been all kinds of things at different times. That's definitely been in that list of experiences for sure.
Tell us a little bit about it. Give us an overview. Nancy started reading it, and she's bad because she'll tell everybody everything.
Yeah, don't
So, and
give
she's
anything
notorious for it. And so now we have a rule. She gets to read a few chapters, and then she's not allowed to do anything. It's terrible. So give us an overview of it and what got you started.
Sure. So basically it's a story about an Appalachian witch that discovers a family talisman, and that takes her on this journey to a deeper self-discovery, where she realizes that there's a little more to her experience in this earth than just being a human. And that's a very general way to kind of point out what book one is about. But there's a heavy
yes,
focus.
book one. Good point, because it's an anthology.
It is definitely going to be, this book specifically is this quest is a trilogy. And so much like a lot of book ones, there's a lot of world building in this book. You're actually pretty much just setting the quest up in this book. She's just getting started. So the quest actually takes off in book two. But what you're trying to get to learn, in my opinion, is who she is on the inside, what kind of a person she is. And what I love about this particular character, she started off strong. We find so often, especially with female lead characters, there has to be this, traumatic weakness that's going on, and some type of savior situations coming through to find a person in a space where they finally can believe in themselves, but I felt like the relationship that she had, the matriarchal relationship she had with her life, with her grandmother, that was it. That was kind of all she needed to kind of acknowledge this inner strength. That was intentional, because I'd like to hope that everyone has a little bit of this natural light. And when nurtured kind of in the right way, I wanted to show that, you don't see a lot of Mercy's relationships with her mom or her dad. It's really just about her grandmother and what's going on with that dynamic. And so I wanted to show a character that just came out the gate ready to take on the world. She has her moments of hesitation throughout there, but much like, and you'll always hear me reference tarot because I'm passionate about it, and it influenced this book in such a deep way. But when you think from a numerology standpoint, from the major arcana, when you're going from 0 to 10, we'll just leave it there. The full, when the full comes into the world and starts having this experience, it isn't until they get to 5, which is the Hierophant, High Priest, whichever deck you work with, that's the challenges in life. And that's what defines character. And so, but what is it about the challenge? It's the grace and the action in which we react to that situation. I wanted to show a character that still went through a level of internal conflict, still had woes about relationships that she was involved in, but never wavered when she was going forward towards her purpose.
Oh, I love it. I love it because we always put women in these things where you're falling down over a tree root, or a man has to save her, and then she has to go against the man,
And
we
we're
have
always
this
running in high heels in the forest. I'm like, come on.
Yeah.
Really, who goes into the forest in high heels,
Not me, hell no. Unless I'm
No.
using the heel on a snake, but then I don't want to do that.
And then they always go,
Same.
Yeah.
like,
But
there's
so
never
this
one
is
big scream or one fall down. It's always,
no,
Yeah.
don't do it.
Oh
No.
no.
Oh no. It's like a video game. It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's really awful.
But tarot, see now the one dog just got all flipped out.
Poor
She's
dog.
all hearing, oh no, and she's like, what?
What?
She's a female, but she wants to know what's going on with the sisterhood. The tarot cards are very interesting because I go to them. I love tarot cards because they are very symbolic, and they allow this perception from you. You're allowed to almost co-create. You can say no.
Absolutely. I'm teaching a workshop soon, and it's based on that. So part of how I wrote this book, this is insane what I'm getting ready to tell you. I want to make it very
cool.
clear.
Well, good.
I do not do this anymore at all. I used to do tarot readings for people. Let's just, for example, let's say in that reading, the message was that a new job potential is coming up, and you need to rest and be available for that, or whatever. Let's say there's some general basic information in that reading. I used to go above and beyond, and I would give my client that reading, and then I would write a short story, a fictitious short story that was kind of fun, depending on the tone of the reading. So I could give it to them in a different way. It was a creative writing kind of grasp of whatever I told.
How interesting. That's cool.
Yeah.
It was psychotic because it took me I don't know why. I was very overly ambitious to combine my creative writing with my tarot experience. And honestly, I didn't have time because I had so many clients, and I was just like, okay, this is stressing me out. But the value of that experience is when I handed that story over, people, for me as a reader, and I'm not saying that this is universal, seem to have had a better response to that experience than my actual direct reading. They really
right. That's why I say there's that, you can have that peace with yourself, and it's not so like creative. It's not so pointy finger.
Well, no, you have to put yourself in the situation that you're not normally in and receive information, which in a lot of ways you're already partially blocking because you're already kind of saying to yourself, why am I really here? Do I even really believe this? Or this is kind of a carnival act, and you're just having fun, but you really still want to hear what the person has to say, because you really do want to know what's in the future or how to handle a situation. So I think when a person comes to see you that already have a whole bunch of mixed emotions.
Mhm.
And
Oh, that's hard though, because it's
Yeah,
like
well,
which
I mean-
emotions dictating what.
yeah, or they go in all cynic. Like if you come in as a cynic, you gain nothing. You come in as
Those
a
are my
believer,
favorite.
yeah, not bad, because that's funny.
Well,
No,
how much of it is that we actually know deep down? You know,
I, I don't know. I just go
Oh, I
back
think
to
we lost you there for a second. Yeah.
oh,
How much of it is do you know that we know deep down? Like
I
the
think
truth.
I think anytime you deliver anything to people, they already know. I think that we don't give ourselves the credit. You know, and even with tarot, you're pulling out as the reader something that's already there. So, and I guess that's dependent on your belief. So I guess I should probably be a little cautious in how I say that. But I had a really great mentor.
Hey, listen, you came out of a meteor crater, so it's all good. we're gonna go back to Kentucky, but continue on. Sorry.
I had a really great mentor that told me, I'll never forget this. He had read someone, it was an older gentleman, he's no longer with us. And he had told this woman that something was going to happen in her life that to my ears sounded just horrid.
mm,
And he said, you know, you were listening from your experience. The people that you read for are always listening from their experience. And that was something that this
sure.
person was
Ooh,
very
that's a good
stressed out
point.
about.
No,
And
it's true.
so in your narrative, that sounded incredibly, you know, threatening, but it was not for this person's experience. And just know that every time you sit down with people, you respect that they are in 100% control of their life, even if they're not acknowledging that. And what you're giving answers that's trying to come through them anyway. And that's the way I try to treat everyone that I sit across from. I want them to let them know I respect you and the energy and all of the things you're bringing to this table, because without you, there would be no situation.
But okay, let me talk about the word occult, because that has a really negative connotation to
Yeah,
it.
we started there. We should go back. Yeah.
Yeah, because you know, as soon as you hear the occult, you go, oh, those people
It's
over
a bunch of
there,
witches in black
like,
hoodies. It's like
and
it's
agents of the devil and all these
they're gonna
things.
eat your cat and
Or other
then jump over a fire at solstice.
No,
No, I'm just
because
saying, like,
the word is just really
and even like witches,
weird.
everybody freaks out. It's like,
I love the word occult, and I love to identify with that word
Okay.
more so than the word witch, just because I don't
Yeah.
solely identify. I'm a magical being trying to live a magical experience in this
oh,
world.
nice.
And I
like
love
that.
alchemy. I love hermetics, and I love things that like sacred geometry, mathematical spiritualism. All of that stuff is incredibly heavy under an occult label. You don't really, I mean, I'm not saying that witchcraft doesn't deal with those things. I mean, we're all very flexible, fluid kind of spiritual practitioners in that realm of living. But what I loved about the occult is there is an intellectual lean in a lot of that information. There's, you know, especially when you think about hermetics, there's people that try to tie so much of mathematical sequencing and all that stuff into our experiences in this world. Tonal. One of the things that I was always, as a younger person, I could feel my inner 12-year-old getting really excited right now. When I started studying hermetics, the first thing that stood out to me was the lack of the feminine presence in there. It's
Wait,
there.
let's back
Oh,
up. Say
yeah.
what is hermetics? Let's just back
Like
up on that.
Hermes and Pythagorean theorem and all of this stuff. It's a heavy topic that I don't want to try to make concise here
Sure.
because it's just, there's so much to it. But it was, you know, kind of a philosophical way of approaching our spiritual experience in this world using mathematics, astrology, and things that were outside of traditional religion. That's and so they were trying to kind of, you know, I'm not saying that that's a truth that I subscribe to, but there's a lot of little nuggets of astrology gems that's within all of that stuff. I would have loved to have seen more female philosopher representation in alchemy. It's not that it wasn't there. There just wasn't, you know, I don't have to go through this with y'all. There just wasn't very much of that, you know, highlighted. But I personally think identifying more as an occultist is a little bit more freeing. To me, witchcraft falls into the same lane as Christianity. And that's okay if that's where you are. I'm just not a traditionalist. And I think that we live in a world right now where witchcraft is becoming more traditional. And there's some, people that are Wiccan, which is different than witchcraft. They do have traditional foundations. And so for me, occult was a nice umbrella term to talk about the taboo things. Like, when I talk about the devil or Lucifer or anything like that, anything in that realm, I'm speaking philosophically. I'm talking about free will. I'm talking about light. I'm not talking about probably what traditional folks in the world see those things, because in Mercy's Quest, Lucifer is the voice of reason throughout a lot of this. That was intentional, and it isn't that he's God. It isn't, and that he'll never be framed up that way. But it was just, and I don't want to I can't
It's
really,
like devil's advocate. To make
and
you've got to take for decision making, and you know what I mean? You can't, you have
Well,
to
it
look at
speaks
all
in
sides.
it speaks in real terms as opposed to what you think. It's reality. It's like, it's this, like, and this is the color blue. And then somebody else, oh, well, that's turquoise. No, it's blue.
Oh, remember that dress
Yeah,
where everybody saw the dress a different color?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's like, this is, and that's a harsh reality for a lot of people. So we put a negative on it.
where, I would love to see a day in the world where we take, be very careful in how I say this.
Yeah.
Anything that's traditional that seemingly has been supportive of an evolutionary kind of experience in this world, in my lens, most often eliminated shadow or anything taboo, evil, or any of this stuff. What I also was very passionate about with Mercy's Quest, and for those that have read the book, they should see this, the elitism and the evilness is in mankind. You won't find that in the hardcore religious or spiritual portions in this book outright. It's people that are making kind of these decisions that are terrible. But I would love to see we maybe evolve a little bit more into a society, and we kind of are with witch talk. Oh, I shudder a little inside to say that out loud. People are starting to embrace shadow and understand that, not everything, because we've been told for a very long time, is so taboo that we don't need to look at and explore it. And so I'm also really cautious when people say, I don't want to read this book because the devil's in it. Or,
This is why I brought up the occult. I wanted to go right there because I think it's important, because here's the deal. Religion changes constant. It's the most constant thing we have, right? And so traditions are never going to be 100% where they were back in the day. It can't. I mean, we lived in Africa. We know witch doctors, shamans. We've been through all kinds of rituals, and eventually we all got to learn, and still are learning, that no, you don't need to kill a lion to do this. You don't need to drink the lion's blood and kill this amazing animal to do this. You can embody the spirit and learn the spirit and be part of that to do it. So there's all these lessons, and so these traditional ways of life, let's put it that way, ways of life and beliefs can change, and they are going to change, because the planet that we are all inhabiting right now is changing, and it's going to change, and you can't, you can have those traditions and maintain them from where they started, and preserve them in writing and art in all so many ways. But it doesn't mean that you can't live at the top floor of a high rise in New York and not, you don't have to live in a swamp to not believe new things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just saying you can be, and you've traveled all over, which I want to hear about, but isn't that part of it when you travel? I remember doing an interview with an author who got into this whole thing about fairies and angels, and how there's evil fairies and nice fairies, and some fairies, and like there's one in Mexico that will pinch your butt, and like they're known for pinching. And I swear to God, when I'm reading her book and a fairy popped up on the page, Nancy goes, "How much wine were you drinking that day?" And I'm like, no, I believe that we may see things and it can be manufactured from us, but who cares? If you can see something that
Well,
visual
It's there for
and
a reason.
visceral,
yeah, if your
Yeah,
mind,
it's
if your
so
mind
cool.
can conjure up somebody's words and see something from that,
That's
you're reading
pretty
these words,
darn cool.
that's powerful.
I can see it every time I even talk about this, and I
Yeah.
talk about a lot. And we've done so many things, shows on psychics and all of it. And I just really believe that we've got to get a grip and be more with nature in some ways.
It's a resource. I mean,
it's a resource. And
that-
you talk about mathematics, and nature doesn't happen without mathematics and geometry and understanding all of that. But what do you think about the calendar, the human-made calendar versus
Time is an illusion. I don't know what it
Ah,
is.
thank you. See, because of change. That's what I wanted to ask. As soon as I read about you, I'm like, I just want to go ask, what do you think about this calendar? Is it a bunch of hooey? Because we were going off. It is, isn't it?
Listen, I have to be
It's
pretty cautious
man-made.
sometimes because I don't know my company. I'm into some really weird stuff. So I definitely, we're not gonna, I do believe, because I am an intuitive person and I'm a dreamer and I do astral projection, and I tell people a lot of the time, if I didn't have this experience, I don't know if I would believe it, because I'm a pretty strong-headed, kind of person. But there's nothing in this world that could ever take that from me because of how much I've experienced that magical part of living. And I feel like since COVID, and since kind of the world has had more of a major shifting in the past 2 and 3 years, I have found myself revisiting different versions of myself in different timelines and dreams.
Oh, yeah.
And
Nancy,
like
you have that. She's a
really being
Bantu from
very
Africa.
present of going back into my childhood in this timeline, more so than how I experienced that prior to this shift that's trying to happen with the earth. And so my own gifts, I'm not the greatest intuitive in the world, but they've been there since I was a kid, and I've been very aware of that. And so my own gifts are shifting in a very big way.
Do you think it's from your family, or that you were open to it as a kid? Or do you think it comes from being on a crater, living in a crater?
I think it's all three, clearly. I'm just kidding.
What?
Honestly, I think all of that, no matter who you are, no matter your bloodline or your family, of course that helped, reinforce the thing that I'm getting ready to say. I have this incredibly loud belief in myself. I remember being a kid and sitting in church because I went to a private Christian school because it was free. My mom was a janitor there and worked in the kitchen. And I come from a very blended pagan Christian kind of family. And so I already was very aware in third grade of the spiritual nature kind of experience in this world. And I remember, and this is my experience, not speaking for all people in this circumstance, being told that as a female, I didn't have a space of spiritual leadership in my church because the woman's place was not that in Southern Baptist. And this is me as a 6-year-old wanting to be a preacher someday, because I think it's the coolest job in the world, having no concept really,
No, you have to be a nurse or a teacher.
Or a wife, or a mom,
Wait,
And
or
if
the
your
daughter of a
wife-
preacher, man.
Yeah, if you're a wife, you have to have
It's always the
46
son of the preacher,
children.
man.
Yeah.
Seriously.
So
I
yeah,
really
go
think
from there.
believing in yourself, though, and just like I'm open to that. But here's what I tell my students in my classes, and a lot of folks that are just now finding their path. I mean, I hate to use very coined phrases like that, but I tell them, really work on your foundation of your belief in self and how you show up in this world first, before you go down the crazy conspiratorial crazy train that I love and enjoy sometimes. I think it's super important outside of all of that to really know who you are and how you show up in this world. What do you believe in? What are you working towards? And how do you view your fellow, people around you in terms, and that has to be pretty locked in, I think, before you start rooting into heavy occult, ritualistic, because I have
That-
seen time and
yes.
time again in different communities, whether it be pagan or Christian, if people have no sense of self in either of those establishments, they get
Then you're
washed up and ate
yeah.
up into something that they're not,
Yeah, and then
Exactly.
fear takes over, someone takes over. You've got to own yourself. You have to
So,
own yourself. Otherwise, and that's where people like get weird about like um hypnotism even. Oh, the devil's going to
oh,
get you when you go down, and Nancy did hypnotism and she was
oh,
with
it's pretty
Sylvester
cool.
Stallone in class. It was cool.
Yeah.
But
Oh, I loved
So,
it too.
yeah.
and but they
Good.
were like people whenever we talk about hypnosis, and I've been hypnotized actually on stage in a production thing, a theater thing, and I knew what I was doing. I knew what I was doing, and I could walk away at any time. It was like, it was
Mhm.
almost like your brain split off into two places. Like your brain knew you are being an idiot going up on stage right now, but you don't care because you can say you're
It's funny.
hypnotized.
It's
So
funny.
no, I'm honest. Like that is honestly what my
Can
brain
I tell
did.
you a fun fact about the book?
And then I did that. Yeah, yeah.
So the very opening scene of my book, and there's a very graphic picture in that opening scene. I've tried to post this graphic picture several times, but
Oh,
it's an unaliving type situation. So anyway, I had past life regression through hypnosis when I was in my early 20s, so almost 25 years ago. And that opening scene of this book is my experience with that. And that's not the full story. That's not this whole book, and it doesn't continue referencing that. But the opening page comes from a journal that's over 20 years old that came out of my room, and that was the first page that started this whole journey, was past life regression
that
hypnosis.
is so cool. But it's really
That's,
cool.
I
Go.
mean, look at I mean, I was told in the hypnotist, I mean, he taped everything. His name was Gil Boyne. He's passed on since, but he was a very famous hypnotist. And I was a 13-year-old Bantu boy
Mhm.
in a past life, according to what I said under hypnosis, which I find really funny. Because, and then I immediately went to Africa because I thought that's cool. I always wanted to go to Africa because
And she went
I
home.
would,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's so there is something, but it's very hard to, it's a very personal thing that people have to reach on their own, because you can't just, I mean, I think as it's like a teacher, you have to lead. You can't force. You have to lead. You have to answer questions, guide, lead, but leave space for the person to find it themselves. You know, and I
That
think
sounds like parenting.
it
Yeah, but I
is.
think in the spiritual community, there's so many people that ego is very much on the
Oh,
forefront,
yes.
and they do want to force that experience. And desperation
Yeah.
energy is a real thing on both ends. And so if I
Mhm.
have someone that sits down at my table and I feel that level of desperation energy, I let them know we're probably not going to be able to get too deep, because when you're sitting in that space, you're not open for
No,
the
you're protective.
You're in a situation. You're in a
you know,
situation. So
we
you
just
want
have to
everything.
reframe the conversation. No
Yeah.
matter what they're asking me, I have to say, we can't talk about that because
Mm.
you're in this space of deprivation
Do
right
you
now.
think with writing Mercy's Quest, let's talk about this. Who do you say is your audience since it's coming out in June 21st? Who is your audience? Is it young adult? Is it adult? Is it everyone? Is
Definitely,
it anyone
probably not
interested?
young adult. I wouldn't say that, even though I was reading things like this as a young adult.
Yeah, because it kind of resonated for me on that. Yeah.
Uh, it's changed for me. I wish I could answer that question. I want to get to a space where I can answer that confidently, because what I thought at the beginning ended up, from ARC copies going out, not being. I looked at this as general witch literature, much like other witch mystery type situations. I read Shirley Damsgaard's series, Ophelia and Abby. That's an older book series from a long time ago. And I would put this kind of in that category. Well, no one that has read it really agrees with me on that. And a lot of people feel like the subject matter is pretty intense, like on a practitioner level. And so I'm going to be honest with you. My hope is that anyone that enjoys like paranormal, any type of level of witchiness, would love this book. But what I have found is people that are practitioners in that kind of space that are familiar with divination, they're the ones that are really loving this book. So I will say this, if you know a lot about either alchemy or different types of Appalachian folklore, I'll throw that out there, you'll see little Easter eggs of things that maybe the average person that's
East,
not in.
it's East. See,
Yeah,
she said Easter eggs.
Yes. There's an opportunity for people to experience this in layers is probably the short answer of that. I would like to think people that are just into general dark kind of taboo subject matter would love this book. But some people have said, hey, what does this mean when you talk about this type of energy exchange? And so I'm learning as an author through this process kind of how to be more prepared for those types of things.
Yeah, it's a different thing going and writing. And then also, I love that you're going from the Appalachian, the mountains, because when I first introduced you on the show, I was like, it's so cool that you're connecting the two. There's something about Southern literature, and I know it's not Southern literature, but it is in a way,
That's a culture.
there's something
It's a culture.
swampy. You go from Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, South Carolina, and then into the, Georgia. I mean,
I make
it's where
actually
the
a
swamps
quote in my
meet
book
there.
about those people. And I compare in my book the Appalachian culture versus that New Orleans, Louisiana kind of vibe. And what I love, and this is me as somebody that I've spent a lot of time in New Orleans. I'm a performance artist, so I go down there a lot. And that's part of, outside of writing, I do a lot of traveling with that. But the thing that stuck out to me the most, and the reason I love New Orleans so much, is there's a slower pace in life in the people that's very familiar with my hometown and where I come from. But there's enough of that eclectic, even though I'm from Kentucky, I don't know if you've all been back in the holler, as we say, in certain parts of coal mine country of Kentucky, because the Appalachian Mountains are different depending on what part you're in.
Right.
And my particular section is full of cryptid mythology, superstitious folks, people that never pocketbooks on the ground because they were afraid their money would run away. I mean, it also had that undertone of superstition, that New Orleans is a little bit more outright putting in your face. And so I thought that it was only natural, that the sisters, the auntie and the grandmother would live in those two places, which Mercy's going back and forth from, because
that's awesome. And I love that you have an aunt and a grandmother, because I think they are so represented in culture of today. And even Nancy, Nana, my great grandmother, was hugely influential in your life. Sure. And I think that's happening a lot. It's like, it's part of the village. The child doesn't just have one parent, they have a village.
No, they're influenced by everything around them, but particular people are influenced more by particular things. It's just how they are. It's just how they are. There's how you're born and then how you were raised, and it mixes up. And as you grow older, there's how you were born, how you were raised, and then the experience.
What are you going to say no to?
Yeah,
I had to watch my language just as I said that.
There's experiences on the way.
I don't believe that.
There's experiences along the way that change your mind, your emotions, or shift them a little bit, and it's that I call education. I wanted to say something about witch doctors in Africa, because I found them to be, the first time I went to a ceremony with a witch doctor, I found it pretty frightening. I'm like, oh boy, I don't think I like this. Then I found it funny. Then I found it not funny, because the costuming and the jump forward with the spear and the yelling in your face and all that. But, so then when the costumes are off and the spirit is laid down, I mean, and this is all kind of, sometimes it was a natural tribal thing, and sometimes it was a put the act on for the tourist thing. But when you talk to the witch doctor without the overly done makeup, with the spirit set down, you would find out that they are actually probably the most intelligent person in the tribe, way more intelligent than the chiefs, and basically through the chief and controlling the chief controlled the tribe. That's what I found. So the connotation of witch doctor wasn't, depending on how the tribe was doing and what they were doing, was either bad or good. So I found it something I still think about when you hear the word witch. Are you a good witch or a bad witch?
Well, it's the
Sticks
same
in
thing
my
as
mind.
why people don't like salespeople. Yet salespeople, they're into psychology. They know how to read people. It doesn't mean they're going to take advantage of you. So I think what's so important about everything we've talked about today is you talk about self-worth, knowing who you are, because then your fears, and fear is a good thing. We need to have fear, but
It's a great teacher.
you know what I mean? Yeah. But fear, we have all these irrational fears just because it's fear of the unknown. And I think that's the important thing from
That's
today's
a lack-
conversation, because you can handle
That's
shamans
a-
and witch
no.
doctors and all of that. It may make you uncomfortable, but if you know who you are, how uncomfortable are you going to be?
Well, the first couple times you're like, whoa. And then after a while, I'm like, you could read the witch doctor and you could actually see them see that you were like, okay, whatever. When the jump forward with the spear, which is you go back, then sometimes just sit there and go, yeah. And they're like, oh, so I'm going to double jump now and come even closer because you elicited a challenge. So it's an interesting play back and forth. And then you talk to them later, and the next day you'd see them in street clothes. You're like, wow, that's really, whoa.
Well,
So it's
but is it, but I want to go
No.
to you, East. I mean, that kind of thing, is that something that, you know, just in a general setting for people to understand that it is part of a wake up call in a way, like what Nancy's talking about, they're like waking her up in a way.
Yeah. And people have different rhythms and ways that they do that. And I
Yeah.
trust, there's a couple of particular medicine folk from different places around the world that I have studied with, and what I have experienced is much like what she's saying. They meet you where you are. Good people that are not good people, that's a terrible way. People that are really practiced in this kind of work will meet you where you are in that regard. So when she was talking about that jumping back and forth and them kind of knowing, I feel like that's an exchange that happens with lots of healers in that community. Because we'll get back to the thing that we were talking about before we had that conversation, people forcing something on someone. And so they're always kind of engaged with the showmanship. I will tell you, and I'm just going to be very honest with you, sometimes puts me off a little bit.
Yeah, I agree.
And because of that, because I talked about this in a couple of other interviews when they were asking about how this stuff shows up in mainstream media. And I was going to give you an example. I went to a little pop-up reading, and there was another tarot card reader and I had a white sweater on, you know, very, very Gap, circa 1997, perhaps. You know, not all of this, you know, my tattoos are covered. And she told me I hadn't dressed up for the part, I guess, that night. There was other readers there. And I just remember I was like, was there a dress code? Like, were we supposed to dress up? And so the type
Nancy got told to put a beanie on her head for an art exhibit because she's an artist. They told her to put a beanie on her head. Well, not a beanie, a beret or whatever.
But I was like, you know, basically, my experience when I grew up as a kid, and the people that I saw reading tarot cards were older folks that were wearing, you know, church dresses and had their hair up in a bun, you know. And it wasn't until I moved out of Middlesboro and I came into the Knoxville spiritual community, my mind was blown a little bit. I was like, okay, there's a lot of people who are very dramatic. You know,
Yeah,
I went to my
it's
first
funny.
ritual and people were calling in the corners and I was like, whoa, I feel like I'm in a movie right now. And
Yeah.
so I can see how sometimes that would be off-putting. But
Yeah,
at
but
the end,
some people want that.
They do.
Actually,
They
they
do.
pay to see because they go there for fun, not for,
Well,
it's
because they
like,
always say
the
tarot
deepening.
card reading is for
Mhm.
entertainment only.
yeah, no. Remember, Lisa, that we went to a swap meet and we had a booth selling paintings next
It's the
door
original
to
Mama Babushka.
that I play that character on radio show sometimes because she was funny. She's dressed all in black. She had this tiny little booth with a crystal ball, and people would go in there, and everyone that left just left in a hurry. And she would come and spit on the ground, and then blackbirds would come down. And I'm like, look. And I'm like, no, they're only after moisture. It's hot.
And then we're like, well, that's our ancestry.
Yeah, so I was like trying to like creep in and look into her little booth there. What was really going on there? And she gave me the evil eye. Like she is like, you come any closer here, we're gonna have words. And I was just like, this is fun. I want to know what you're doing in here because you're freaking people out. But then, and I'm like, okay, this is just. I don't want to say it was an act because she was so serious that I thought, okay, she is really into this, but it's not working on San Diegans,
No, it's funny. But I wanted to go, talking about,
you remember what I'm
readings.
talking about, Lisa.
Yeah. No, it's the original Mama Babushka. With the book coming out June 21st for a summer solstice, are you going to do like a book tour or readings in person, tarot card readings, book clubs? Are you going to connect with people with this? Because I think it's a very interactive kind of,
Yeah. So I
experience.
haven't said this yet, but this is my plan. I have a couple of book tour things coming up. I'll be at Mystic South Conference in Atlanta in July, and I'll be teaching a creative writing with tarot workshop there and doing a book signing and all that stuff. And then I'll be at Hex Fest in New Orleans. But when I sign the books, when people buy a book, they get a tarot card from just a stock that I have of loose tarot cards. So they'll get a 1-card reading along with their book when they do the meet and greet. So that way they can get a little bit of an experience of the energy that went into the book and all of that stuff. So
awesome. And what about doing book clubs through this? Do you see that being a thing? Because I just feel like this is not just a book, this is an experience and an educational. I mean, I know we've gone all over the woo-woo map today, but it's important because I want people to understand that the occult is not the devil necessarily.
Right.
That's my big point in this. And I think the more that people write books like yours, the better for some understanding. And I love, again, like what you were talking about, understanding who you are. And I think part of that is the spiritual journey, whether it's, Christianity, Islam, Muhammad, whatever, or is it going to be on the occult side, or is it Mother Nature? All of it's going to be who makes you, and you're allowed to, when you're on this planet Earth, explore all of them, and take what you want, So, just be respectful about it. That's the thing, So, and try to give back too. You can't take without giving back. I'm just saying.
Reciprocity.
It is, right? It's so, but book clubs, because I think this is an experience. This is a book, and the book is part of this greater thing, and vice versa, really. So do you see doing this as a traveling event, a book? I know you're doing the signings like you talked about, but like interactive online book clubs, all of that.
I hope so. I'm hoping, I'm putting kind of all those eggs specifically into this creative writing with tarot workshop, because I feel like that really kind of embodies how I wrote this book and the energy exchange that you're going to experience in there. And it also gives people that are other writers that aren't into tarot an opportunity to find a fun new way. And I'll tell you that this is brand new. I'm just going to exclusive information here. I do have a surprise book that will be coming out that will be with me at Fanboy Expo in Knoxville. Cool. And what this book is is it's a combination of, if you remember Mad Libs, I used to do Mad Libs a lot when I was a kid, and that's the story where you would put the noun and the verb and you would add your own word to make the story.
Yeah.
I did a little choose your own adventure meets Mad Lib type tarot workbook to help teach people how to use creative thinking with tarot reading, either their spreads or in writing. You could apply that same principle either way. And so my hope is that I can get out and work and teach this workshop. And then eventually, when people get to know Mercy and they get to know this journey, and book 2 comes out that really tries to tie in this whole human evolutionary experience a lot more, the book can actually be a workable experience where we can talk about, because I read a lot of The Alchemist and Celestine Prophecy and stuff like that growing up, and getting familiar with energy in the world. And one of my recent critical reviews, the person compared it to the Celestine Prophecy. They said they felt it was a bit too deep like that. And I was like, what? That's so amazing. So I would love, the reason that I haven't really promoted that, it's because of what we're talking about, because of the dark subject matter. I hope that people can find that even though this story, takes a little bit more of a darker turn, there's still those same principles in how we interact in our evolutionary experience in this world and how important the choices are that we make. And I'd love for this to be conversational at some point.
I love it also that energy workers, is that the right word? I don't know. I'm never good at terms. I'm never politically correct. So, but those who are in what you do, divination, I want to say that's a candy. Divinity. Give me. Oh, she went away. Come back. Uh-oh.
I'm
We
here.
went to the dark. We went to the dark side, everybody. That's it. But I said divinity. Divinity. I want divinity. But anyway, no. When you look at those who are in the practice of this, and it's your book is resonating with them, I think that is actually this, untapped thing that is important, because everybody in their field needs fuel and sustenance and something that resonates with them. And in so many, I don't want to say industries, but it's true, they're left out. And so I think it's an important thing, because that would be something that trickles down and through. So it's a very good thing that it goes with those who are teaching and doing readings and everything, because then it goes through on a greater scale in a way. And it is conversational with what you're doing. So I really think if
I
it
want to
didn't
normalize it as a
resonate,
resource.
if it didn't resonate with them, that would be a problem. You know what I
Right.
mean? You still, but I think it's great, because who writes books for teachers? We had a dancer on our show, Hamal Story, and Jamal. I want to say Hamal. Yeah, lived in San Diego and Tucson.
Yeah.
But Jamal Story, he was the dance leader and manager for Cher. He was on our show, and he wrote a murder mystery of dancing in the dance world. And he's like, how many books, murder mysteries, do you have of dance? Like and we've actually managed to do, I think, 2 or 3 now. But it's the dance world gets totally, there's very few books for dancers about who they are. And when they get that really resonates, and it means so much. So I just want to say that when you were talking about those that have read it, that are in your world of doing readings, teachings, all of that, I think that's a really good thing, because it resonates and helps them do better too. So that's really cool.
I think it's really worthwhile for people to open their minds and go read something that you never thought you would read, or maybe you have been instructed not to read. I don't like this closed door thing, like if you read this, the devil's going to get you. That kind of attitude is, I find that kind of attitude that's portrayed is by someone who is actually trying to control you and what you think. So I think it's good for people to read things they don't think they should, things that they think they're not interested in, just to widen their scope to
just like
understand
in
this.
politics.
Yeah,
Look at
just to,
both sides. Read,
You have
watch.
to.
yeah, and
Absolutely.
yeah. Oh, don't talk politics. I want to take the party
Okay,
system.
send them to the dark side.
No, I want to take the party system and smash it up and say, just vote for the issue or the person you believe in, not along party lines.
All right.
Stop
Yeah.
being controlled by
Exactly.
party lines because you're too
Mhm.
lazy to think for yourself,
But this-
possibly. Just
But
gonna
this
say
is
that.
where I think all of these other systems, and these are world
This-
systems, these are natural systems. I'm calling it systems because it
I
is,
love
and it gets
that,
into
actually.
the math,
Yeah.
right? It's really true.
Yeah,
I'm a nature person, and actually nature works pretty darn well if we don't screw her over.
well,
And
she
she
works on
and she's cleaning
instinct.
herself up. We just don't like it. But when you look at these systems, they do work naturally and in a strong way. And when we decide, oh, we don't want to do that, it's not going to work, And when you talk about politics and all of that, it's just really, I think we have to learn about all these different ways instead of just focusing. We have to be strong on self, but not focusing on greed and self. And they don't want you to know about other things, about how to live. That's basically it. The fear that
I
is.
think you protect yourself by being educated in as many spheres as possible.
That's it.
Doesn't mean you have to prescribe to every single thing that you read or believe it, but at least know it's out there and have a real understanding of it, not an understanding that somebody else has told you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Find out for yourself.
That's it. So there it is. Read Mercy's Quest, book 1
Yeah.
of 3. And everyone, again, East S.M is the author, and it is out on June 21st. You can order it now. Go to theartisteast.com and also keep up with us at bigblendradio.com. Thank you so much for joining us, and for what a conversation. I think we went
that was cool.
all over the place and different worlds that we didn't know we were going to do.
Yeah, thank y'all so much. This is great.
Awesome.
Thank you.